Well, I want to thank Ben King and Clive Greenwood to be here this morning on December 10 to do sort of a roundtable and talk about what is going on with the COVID zero policy. Is it going to go away very fast? What is really happening? What might happen in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, right? So, gentlemen, maybe you can start by introducing yourselves. Maybe do you want to start, Ben?
Yeah, my name is Ben King. My company is Kinyu SEM. I've been based in China for about 7 years, and in the last 2 years, with various people coming to me on cross industry, I decided to set up the China desk, which is a platform for companies to hire supply chain personnel in China to work more closely with their suppliers here, and particularly during this COVID period.
All right. And Clive, go ahead.
Well, okay. Thanks for inviting me back again, Renaud. It's a pleasure to always be with you on these types of things. Hello, Ben. As your regular viewers will know, I'm Clive Greenwood. I'm a compliance consultant. I'm the chief consultant for SMC Global. We work primarily on compliance to ISO standards, both automotive, medical devices, which is what I specialize in, and general consumer electronics. And
right.
Your regular viewers will no doubt know what I do.
Yeah. Great. Yes. Oh, and on my side, yeah, for people who don't know, the company Sofeast basically help companies that develop new products, set up new supply chain, get their products to the market on time, in compliance, and so forth. All right. So there's been a lot of discussion online, right, in the past 8 to 10 days, right? So if I give a very quick summary, basically the number of infections has been going up, especially in major cities like Guangzhou, Beijing, Zhengzhou, and so on, to the point where actually I believe they can't go back to COVID zero. It's really way too late. And Beijing has started to send some signals, right? Coming out with research papers saying, oh, actually, this virus is really not very deadly at all. And pushing that in all the channels. It's interesting how fast they can pivot to a new view. And also a few days ago, 3 days ago, they published 10 measures that start to give some guideline. Certain things are really changing. The policy is changing. So there's no doubt that at the Beijing level, things are changing. But the big question now is, what about the local level? So maybe both of you are in mainland China. Maybe you can you can tell us a little bit about what you have seen actually in the past week or so, right? Have things really changed for you? Who wants to start?
Well, I'll go then. Yeah. Answer: nothing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's not probably true. We have seen the closing of the testing stations, but everything else remains the same.
Okay. So you used to be tested every day, right? Right.
Yeah.
And now, is it still in place?
No, there is no testing. If you want to go anywhere, you need to get a test.
Okay. So the testing stations. Okay. So the testing station that used to be close to your place is closed, but you still need to be tested to go to a restaurant or someplace.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Really?
Okay.
And is that in Suzhou, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's incredible, because I was down in Guangzhou a couple of weeks ago, and when I was there, which is where I'm based, just pretty dire situation with everything shut and testing every day, and then up to Changsha, in order to go to Tianjin, because of the different travel restrictions, depending on where you're going to and where you're coming from, a bit of a maze. And different in Changsha. But then in Tianjin this week, at least in Tianjin, I've seen quite a huge change from the beginning of the week. So when I arrived, the policy on Tuesday, the policy was that I had to do 3 tests in 3 days when I was there, after arrival. And then on the second day, the policy actually changed to doing 2 tests within 3 days. On the third day, they'd actually scrapped that and said you only need a test to go to the airport, or for the return flight. And then actually on the last day, they scrapped that as well. So throughout that week, the policy had completely changed. And when I flew back from Tianjin to Changsha, I didn't need to do any tests to go into the airport. I arrived in Changsha. I didn't have to show any code or any test to arrive in Changsha. It was quite amazing, to be honest. And I wasn't in a factory, but I was in a product company that develops products and manufactures them with their factory nearby. And throughout the week, the mood had changed significantly. They knew people who had tested positive. They were, along the corridors, people were saying about how it's almost inevitable. Everyone's going to get it at some point, and an understanding that the risk management had now turned on the person themselves. So they were sort of, when we didn't go out for any lunches or dinners because they realized that they themselves want to be able to go back home to their family, whereas before we would much more easily go out and go to places. So I think there was
this is what happens though when you've actually told the population that this thing is as bad as cholera or the bubonic plague, because it was actually within the Chinese CDC still labeled as in that group A category. You can't just turn it on and off like a light switch.
Right. How long is it going to take?
I think the mood, and I think there are definitely a lot of people. I mean, also when we were there, we would see people walking past with COVID self test kits, and buy N95 masks and all that. I mean, they're definitely not going to roll down and sort of take it. They definitely want to avoid it. But I think across the country, I think it'll be different in every place in terms of how people, what people's thoughts are, or on the prospect of actually getting COVID.
Definitely. What about the local government? So Ben, you said the policy kept changing. How did you get the updates? Did someone have to call the local government? Did you have everything in very easy to see in WeChat?
It was getting announced. I mean, there's each local city has its own Chinese and English versions of various news updates. I'll show you. In Tianjin,
it's what you sort of like live by. Is this? It's on your WeChat.
Right. Yeah, you have like a thread of.
There are lots of English ones which are pretty quick. Which one's that?
This is the Suzhou.
Yeah, it's very decentralized.
Yeah,
right.
It just comes in and tells you whatever the policy is at the day. I think the question is, it's not about the policy which has actually been made by government. I think it's what's happening is that there is still no micromanagement of the situation, where even security guards, because they've had their throwback to their little red armbands now to their big white uniforms, they still believe that they have the power of life and death, and you will not enter this building. That's a problem.
So that's Yeah, that's an interesting point. So it's not just the people who have been told for about 3 years that it's a very bad virus, right? But it's also the local population, sorry, the local government, sorry, at every level, right? Provincial level, city level, district level, and so on and so forth, all the way down to the building guards and the neighborhood watch ladies or whatever they are called.
Yeah.
The when they announced, it was about a month ago now, the 20 new policies or policy updates, adjustments, they were announced at the national level, and the ones which were related to international aspects, like the quarantine from abroad changing from 7 days to 5 days, got implemented fairly well, pretty much across the board, evenly and clearly, because I think that's controlled centrally because it's the border. But everything which was domestic was pushed out to the provincial authorities, and I think it was just very vague. And so it was just interpreted completely differently, and then interpreted differently by the people below them, and then the people below them. So then after a few weeks of chaos, there had to be a load of clarification saying, no, you cannot lock this building, or you cannot lock these fire exits, and things like that. But yeah, as Clive said, it went all the way right down to even the security, the BAO and the security of individual compounds, sort of trying to interpret how to control something which was increasingly becoming more difficult to control.
Because what are these people's incentives, right? If they are too strict, nothing bad can happen to them. But what if they are too lenient, and then there's a bunch of infection starting? That's where it goes wrong for them, right? Is that part of the problem?
I think the problem was that it was a double-edged sword. If they let people in with COVID, they got it in the neck. If they didn't, they got it in the neck. There was no win situation. The problem is that the policies were, as Ben says, so vague that open to interpretation was that there was no win. So, I could talk about where I live. I mean, every morning you would go and have a test, and they would give you a little piece of paper to say that you'd had a test. Now, the 24-hour test took 26 hours to actually get it on your telephone. So they said, okay, well, it will be now from the time that it was actually tested, which was in the middle of the night. Okay, fine, makes more sense. Coming back, though, if you lost that little bit of paper, and I'm talking a little bit, something like not even as big as your business card, and certainly a lot more flimsy. If you lost that, you were not getting back into your own home.
Right. And that's in Suzhou. Yeah.
That's in Suzhou, which was totally and absolutely ridiculous. And this happened to me. And these security guards have known me for 3 years. Yeah. I'm the big bad Western that drives the big motorbike that makes a lot of noise and makes sure that they open the gate for him instead of going up the walkway. Not that they didn't know me. Oh, no, you need that bit of paper. At the end, I had to call my wife down. She come, tried to talk to them. Oh, no. So then I actually physically called the police. And I said, now, look, you sort this out or else. Yeah. So anyway, the police come and they talk to the security guard, and they said to the security guard, do you know this guy? He went, oh, yes, he lives here.
Right.
Sorry, guys.
So you had to go up to police, depends on the city level, right? To clarify to the local level guys, don't be completely silly, right, guys, right? Yeah. Right. So
and there are lots of stories like that. It's
common.
You think that's the thing. I mean, you'd think that was a one-off, but it's not.
But it's not. No.
Yeah. I mean,
think of Shanghai. They not just Shanghai, but they bolted your doors so you could not even get into the hallway. So if you had a fire in your home or something, yeah, you could not get out. I mean, there's been a lot of very silly stuff, right? All over the place, all over the place. So this has been going on for years now, right?
3
So
years.
that's the situation. That's the situation. And it started with a big bang in Wuhan, when everybody say, "Oh, there's a lot of people dying," and so on, right? So people get scared. The officials at every level got tough and tougher and tough to the point of being really silly. Okay, how do you think now the local levels, the local officials and so on, all the way down to the guards and so on, how are they going to react to the easing of the restrictions? Have you seen them ease? Because like both of you saw the impact, the change on the obligations to test. Okay, but this is not at the very, very local level, right? This is not the neighborhood committee lady. This is not the Bao'an guys, right? This has been directly translated, right? Somebody sort of pressed the switch and say, okay, this is changed. And this was not the very local level. But what about all the other restrictions? And including also the self-restrictions. What's most scary to me is the factories and the big companies just saying, okay, this is my policy because I'm afraid I'm going to get locked down, right? Is this going to get better, or is it going to get worse?
Ben, I'll let you answer that with your crystal ball.
About the security in various places, I'd say just in general across China, I think there will be pockets of places that haven't. Definitely the smaller cities that you go to where they're going to be slower on the change, and there's definitely going to be people who react differently. One thing that's interesting is that a lot of communities across China are doing the management in the communities where people live are doing these sort of mini surveys where they ask all the people who live there whether or not they are willing to accept people to quarantine at home and things like this. So, and if they are, then they will do it. And that was before that they've sort of recently announced that people can quarantine at home. But even before then, when the policy nationally wasn't introduced, there were many communities saying, if someone gets COVID, are you willing to allow them to stay at home? And I think that was probably would be the same with the various restrictions in and out. And I do think that some communities in various cities across the whole of China will act differently. I think some people will definitely, maybe there will be an imbalance. About the factories, I think that there will be there'll be a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, and I think it might come soon, but then it will change. Because I think people in the factories will get it eventually, and or they will know a lot of it around. The one important thing is that cases are not counted anymore. So it's very difficult to know what the risk levels are. So I guess if we think about it logically, like if I'm just thinking of Tianjin and the factory that sort of we work with there, if they can't see where you've come from, and there's no code and there's no need for a proof of test, then how are they going to block everyone out? Because if it doesn't really matter if you're from local Tianjin or if you're from abroad, from other province. Before they were more like, only letting, or conscious of people who are from outside of Tianjin. So, but now being in Tianjin is no different from coming from another province. It's not like coming from Guangdong, where Guangzhou, where there are lots of cases, to Tianjin is particularly more risky, because in Tianjin they've all opened up and people are getting COVID left, right, and center. So they either don't even let their own partners in who they actually cooperate with and on a very deep level, or maybe even some of their own staff who can get it quite just as easily now. Or so logically they shouldn't be barring people coming from outside their home city, but I think there will be a knee-jerk reaction, especially with certain factories. I can imagine that state-owned factories absolutely probably not going to let anyone in for a while. But so that's my thought. I don't know about you, Clive.
Well, only yesterday I actually had to cancel an appointment with a company down in Shenzhen, because they said, well, if you're coming from Suzhou, which has got a high number of cases, which is, I mean, we're talking 57, which is out of a population of 14 million, is not, my calculator doesn't go that many zeros to see what the percentage of risk is. But anyway, they said, oh, no, we need you to have 3 tests. Well, okay, so where do I thought, okay, right. So I actually phoned the government and said, you're closing down the test centres. Where do you get the 3 tests from? And the answer was, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, that's the messy transition, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, well, okay. So anyway, I'm going for a ride around. I'm going to, hopefully the weather's nice. I'm going to take the bike out and go for a ride around. I'm going to actually identify where these test centres supposedly are. Now, there was 12 in my immediate 1 kilometre area. So it doesn't take a lot of working out how many there were. I think that the big question here is what's in the future. Mm-hmm. Now, we all work in the service industry. We provide services to our clients, and that requires various aspects. I think looking at what's going to happen in the next week is impossible. What's happening in the next 3 weeks is highly unlikely, and what happens in the next 6 months is impossible to say with any level of guidance or surety. I think that what we should do, guys, is we should actually address the big elephant in the room. What does China need to do to get its image back? Yeah, you got to look at this. I mean, it's okay opening up, fine, opening up, great. Yes, everything's going to be wide open. Is anybody going to come back?
So you're projecting yourself. Let's say China bottom to the top. All the governments and authorities say it's okay. People can go. And there's going to be wave after wave, like we've seen in Europe, in the US, and so on, right? And they're just going to let it go through, and China is going to be back into the, let's say, the West normal situation, let's say, with international flights coming in freely. So that's where you project yourself, right? We don't know how long, right? In 6 months, in 12 months, okay, if ever, nobody knows.
If ever,
right?
Yeah,
right.
I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
About the international thing, I've thought about it, and I've come up with an analysis that I don't know, back at school you learn about osmosis. How when something goes to somewhere less saturated. So I think the borders, they'll only open when the risk levels inside China are the same as the risk levels outside of China. And so I don't think they'll open up before that, until as long as outside of China it is more risky than what's going on inside of China. I'm not sure if they'll fully open up.
Well,
And
look at Hong Kong.
And I think how you define that could be in various ways. It could be by number of cases. It could be by the same variants flying around. And I think it will happen eventually. But they've gone through this whole year trying to understand Omicron. From a scientific point of view, and then they've decided that it's not actually that bad.
Yeah, whereas but with all respect, that data's been out there. With all respect, that data's been out there.
I know it has. It has. But when other countries when they opened up, they definitely opened up when they didn't know everything about Omicron, but they need to open up, right? So I think I don't think it's going to happen quickly. I think it's going to happen. It's going to happen slowly. They're going to go at their own pace, to the frustration of many, including.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, look at Hong Kong. Who would say that the situation in Hong Kong is safer than outside of Hong Kong? Everybody around me got the virus. I mean, it's and
which is why they opened up, probably.
But not completely. You arrive in the airport, there's not that many flights, you have all the people in full white combination, everywhere to greet you and stuff. Now the process is much more streamlined than before when you arrive at the airport, but still you have the QR code stuff and they use it for the first 3 days. You cannot go to any place where basically several people would remove the mask, such as a restaurant, a bar, and so on, right? And they are not removing it, and they don't understand. This is costing them a lot of conferences and international events that are not coming back to Hong Kong, and but they still maintain it anyway. So it's a bit political, maybe that's because China is completely, it's pretty much closed, let's say, and they don't want to show that Hong Kong is completely open. So maybe that's the reason. But I see China reopening, let's say, fully, very, very slowly at the border level, right?
I don't think that's the question, though.
So your question is, will people want to come back? I know a lot of people who really want to come back. And actually, just these things have been eased up a bit in the past, couple of months. We've had 2 or 3 clients do a business visa. We did the letter and invitation and everything. They came. I mean, they really wanted to come. They went through quarantine and everything. We have 3 staff who really wanted to come back to China. They did the work visa and came back. I mean, a lot of people really want to come back. A lot of buyers, I see it in LinkedIn all the time. Oh, I wish you could open. I really want to go. It's been so long and so on. Now, maybe when they come back and they see what it's like, they will not like it so much. But that's another topic. Now, I think what you are alluding to is that there's also a lot of companies, especially from US, Canada, UK, Australia, right, that have been working very hard to find alternatives to China manufacturing. I guess that's what you mean. And of course, this trend has been accelerating, right? I'm sure, Ben, you've seen that a lot also, right?
Yeah. There's definitely companies who are looking for alternatives, and I guess the key thing is that they can go to those places right now, even if it's just a scope out trip to look at some places. I think the whole it depends on various industries, but I think it will. Some industries will be easier than others to relocate and to find alternative suppliers for. But I
mean, I don't think that decoupling is going to be overnight. It's going to be a 10-year period where because when you saw the initial impact, and I was here in China when Let's Come to China, and it was the land of milk and honey. It was a 10-year transition, maybe 15 years, and now we hit the point in about 2023, 24. But since those times, what I believe is happening is that people's going, well, let's have a look at what the risk is. And many of the buyers have been using, we can get the product cheaper from China and that mitigates the risk. And that's no longer the case. Because the risk now is greater than what the benefits of having the cheaper product is. That's the bit which I'm trying to get to that point, is to say that it's okay that the companies may say, right, guys, we will we'll ramp back up in China, not a problem. But with all the other things after or during or slightly before COVID, the restrictions which were being placed on foreign experts to come to China, family men who tended to be in the job for 20 years, knew what they were doing, was getting to a point where the guys were saying, it's no longer in my interest to be in China. I'm not talking about the companies now, I'm talking about the personnel, the actual human side of this.
No question. It's become much less attractive to expats, especially experienced expats. Yeah.
Right. So going back to what the subject of this is, while ever you've got a risk of lockdowns happening in a heartbeat, unsurety. Do I go to work and cannot get back home at night? Unless they get rid of this, even if the borders are open, people are not going to come. Family men will not come. You might get the odd businessman that comes, starts to look at it, and goes back home and says to his board of directors, no, guys.
Yeah,
China's got
some of that.
Yeah, China's got a huge image problem.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to take years to get it back.
It has gone downhill for the past 10 years, sort of continuously, with an acceleration in 2020, I would say.
Yeah, China's image now is as bad as Germany was in 1946.
I mean, look at everybody around China hates them. I mean, that's, as a starting point, that's not a very good sign, right? They have little conflicts with everybody, especially South China Sea. Yeah, that is a huge problem that does come with risks, because of course I think where you're going is that this is going to accelerate what people call decoupling, and this is there's an enormous desire for it, let's say, talking to our clients and so on. I mean, there's an enormous desire to get manufacturing out of China. However, the supply chains in other places are not there yet. It's going to go there, but we need to see. For example, I'm looking very closely at what big guys like Apple are doing, and it came out in the Wall Street Journal just when was that?
A few days ago. Yeah,
a few days ago, that they're actually accelerating the switch of manufacturing of iPhone and also some iPad to India and some other things like their earbuds and so on to Vietnam. And when China does that, they don't want, it's very clear, they don't want to do the NPI in China. They don't want to get 90% of the components from China to these places for assembly. They want to develop the local network, and that is really what's going to develop that network of suppliers in those places.
Yeah.
And this
and
is
I guess and going back to your question, Renaud, about what's going to happen, as in, will there be knee-jerk, will there be more lockdowns, will it affect the supply chain? The thing is that Clive and I are on the ground. There's a lot of experience working with factories and all that, and experience working in China. And the fact is that we do not know. Apple doesn't know either, and that's the problem.
Well,
so how are they going to develop their next models of iPhones if they don't know how the workers, the management, the local governments are going to react when there's COVID everywhere?
I think that, especially
I mean,
Apple,
how
actually.
are they going to react? I mean, they really need to improve their messaging and reassure companies that no matter what's going to happen, they're not going to lock down.
Yes, exactly. But it's not just,
and no matter what's going to happen, the workers are not going to be afraid of it. I mean, I don't know how they do that, but they need to find a way of.
Because imagine Foxconn Zhengzhou or Foxconn Shenzhen, because they moved some work back to Shenzhen and so on. These are huge places, right? Cities within the city. And then if you are an operator and you go and work there, you work in a workshop with at least 50 other people or 100 other people, plus the logistics people, everything, the quality people and so on, keep turning from workshop to workshop and to the warehouse and so on. For sure, if you work there, you will get the virus, for sure. And the bigger the factory, the higher the chance, right? I don't see a way for them to sort of compartmentalize it into small units and so on. This is not the way that the production is set up there. Forget it. It's not going to happen. So what are the workers going to do? And what are the middle managers going to do, the engineers and the production leaders and so on? They might say, well, you know what? I'm going to lay flat, as they say, for 3 months. I'm just going to go home, do some stuff, whatever, help the family. I'm not going to be in this mess. I'll just get out of here, right?
I think
that's my bet.
Yeah, I think that the question is how does China in itself, not alone the companies, but China in itself, reassure the world? And that is not just something which has happened from COVID. I was here, I don't know if you were, Ben, when SARS 1 hit. And that was bad. This has been. Do you ever watch the film called Contagion, which must have been a precursor for this? Because I mean, Now, okay, we have to analyze a couple of points here to make any judgment as to what's going to happen in the future. Now, you remember when I wrote my paper called Checkmate?
Mm-hmm.
When I wrote that, if anybody wants that, by the way, it is online. I looked then at what were the contributing factors which actually took us to this stage. Now, those contributing factors are still there.
Oh, yeah. There's going to be COVID number 2 or what, with a certain probability, let's say. Mm-hmm.
A very high probability. The question is, we don't know where this thing come from, as I said in that paper, but you know, you do not need to be a mathematician to realize that 1 + 1 = 2, and it's called a lab. The first point of reassuring the world must be complete openness. Just, I'm sorry, and I hate to say it to our Chinese listeners, but until China becomes, let's say, a little less opaque about what happened, no one's going to trust it. The question's got to be, would you bring your family to China on a 2-year assignment now or a year's time? Would you risk it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if the answer is anywhere close to no, then we have a problem.
Yeah. You know, I was talking with someone working in a bank here, very involved in international trade, and he was telling me China is no longer a country where companies will invest to develop activities and so on. It will be mostly just a sourcing country, sort of arm's length sort of sourcing. Okay, we need these steel rods, we need this whatever, this plastic enclosure, we need this, we need that, or we need that coffee machine. Just going to buy it and distribute it and so on. And we're not going to invest, set up the infrastructure, set up the facilities and put 10 foreign experts and 5 senior managers and so on and so forth. And I think that's where you're getting at, right?
Well, I'm looking at it purely from the human side of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the companies make financial decisions where the actual good of their people, although they like to say it is within their calculation. We all know that is nice thing to put on the sales blurb, but really it's about the bottom line.
Yeah.
The question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ben, go on.
Your point about the foreign experts coming, I guess, is also, it's sort of like, what is the long-term agenda for China? And it's sort of like, if you think of the dual circulation policy, where a lot of the factories, a lot of the companies that are investing are purely for domestic consumption, are for their operations for within China. And yeah, definitely there will still need some foreign expert for various specialities, but in terms of understanding the market here, then I think it will become more, there'll be more and more local personnel taking some of those spots. And like you said, there won't be a choice, because there'll be a lack of people wanting to come to China, so they're going to have to try, and I think it will become a lot more localized. And I mean, most of the companies who are continuing their sort of foreign direct investment are sort of the big European companies who have already got a foothold in here and are mainly sort of serving the domestic market, because it is still a massive market, and large companies, I think, are still going to want to take advantage of it for its own domestic market. But in terms of but in terms of sort of outsourcing, or at least developing factories for then manufacturing for product which is going overseas, for the global market. Yeah, I think a lot of companies will be looking, really looking at that strategy and changing it. And I think the same with what Renaud said about maybe that it will always play a part, but there'll be more and more sort of it will only be a part and not the full supply chain solution.
Yeah, there will be attempts at doing that. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back to what I think the burning thing, what most people would probably want to try, and we won't be able to answer it properly, but what people want the answer for is, right now, if you do have your supply chain in China, and your market is in the US or Europe, and you're manufacturing in China, how is you don't have that alternative supply chain. What is going to happen next year, and how can you plan for it? So I guess we can think about different scenarios. The cases go up, there's a health emergency, and then there are lockdowns. How should foreign companies react to that? Another scenario could be that they cover up the extent of the health emergency, which could be a credible scenario, or I don't know, somewhere in between.
Right.
Or
exactly.
will it be regional? Will it be fractionalized, where some places are great and some places are not?
Exactly. Yeah, these three things are what most people, from what I heard or I read, are sort of wondering about. There's a scenario where they open quickly, it's messy, like it was in Vietnam, let's say. In Vietnam, they kind of get submerged, they get lockdowns and so on, and then there was a messy transition, but now they're pretty much open, right? There's a scenario where they open and then they feel that they open too fast. The healthcare system is completely submerged. And now what, right? And now they might introduce new restrictions, it's just going to be 3 weeks or 1 month or whatever. Sort of like in continental Europe, there was a lot of that, the wave is going, let's try to flatten the wave so that it's more, instead of a big peak and everything, the hospitals cannot follow, we're going to flatten it, make it, longer in time, so we have more time to treat people. So it could be like a little bit of stop and go, right?
I would agree with that, apart from one thing right now. Let's just look at geographically, Suzhou, okay? 15,000 testing centres and two vaccine centres.
Yeah. Talk about prevention. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like...
Yeah. Do you think
we've missed the boat?
Do you think the testing centres will come back?
Yes.
What I think is that Beijing wanted to wait until they had a RMNA vaccine or whatever. They wanted to wait longer. They definitely did not want to open in the winter. So I think they're going to make it very slow, very gradual. And as you said, Ben, maybe Guangdong first, and let's see how it works, because it's in the south. But now here it's still the winter in the north, sort of, it might go like that. And now if that happens, you're in Guangdong, you want to travel to Tianjin, you're going to have a problem. Nobody will want to see you, right? So this would be messy for people who travel around. But I think the virus got out of control way too fast, and now they're kind of forced by events and people's demands to signal that they're opening, but they don't want to open that fast. And they're not. This is not their timing. They're not happy about that. So what's going to happen? They're going to go through the motions, not think too much, and say, okay, you guys want to open. We're going to show you what it looks like when you open, and maybe you will say that we were right, or no idea how they're going to spin that out.
There is very much a told you so syndrome that has to go into the equation.
I'm afraid so.
Yeah. I think anybody that's been here any length of time will tell you that that's par for the course. Now, if we're talking to foreign companies and we're saying to them, okay, this is now, I don't think anybody would believe us if we said everything's honky-dory and don't worry about it, there's no problem. Because that's just not true. If we said to them, it's going to get better before it gets worse, that's also not true. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. Now, from my view, the only way out of this, both short-term and long-term, is exactly what they did in the rest of the world. Huge vaccine rollout. Easy for people to get vaccines. In China, where I am in Suzhou, there is 2 vaccine stations. That's it. In the whole of the city of 14 million people. 2. Yeah. 15,000 test centers, 2 vaccine centers.
Right. But in when was that?
I think I'm hoping that will change though, because I think a lot of the vaccine thing, I think that it's like similar to what happened in Hong Kong. Is for 3 years we've been under zero COVID, nearly 3 years under zero COVID strategy. If you have any doubt about getting the vaccine, you'd be like, well, there's no COVID, so why do I need a vaccine? And it's definitely not the right. It's definitely not the right attitude to have, but it's an attitude that was had amongst elderly people in Hong Kong, and so. Because if there's no COVID, then
why do you need a vaccine?
Having a vaccine is therefore more risky than not having a vaccine if you feel like you don't need to have the vaccine.
Well, that's the messaging problem.
Yeah, it is. It's a massive messaging problem.
It's like the COVID working. We're going to lock you down. We're going to lock you in your apartments for your own good.
Right.
And then because our scientists have found out or refound out or reinvented or whatever you want to call it, that this is no more than just a bad cold to the vast majority of people. The 2 things just don't equate. And it's this opaqueness which is causing the confusion. And it's this opaqueness which is going to actually just limit the way out of this.
Yeah, I was expecting that things would only open up when they'd done a massive PR campaign. to say like, to do what they're doing now, but I would have thought it would have happened for like 3 months before they stopped testing and things like that. But and I think, yeah, like we said, I think their hand was forced a bit. But yeah, there definitely has to be that messaging. And the vaccines, I think there is for the first time for nearly 3 years, the prospect of actually catching COVID in China is now actually genuine. It's like where you go on the.
It's very real.
Yeah, like you actually wear your mask properly now. So, and I think that's going to be the same with vulnerable people. Is I think I hope that they will make that rational decision to realize that actually getting the vaccine is better. You know, it's less risky than not now. Because that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, there's cases as well where I don't know whether or not you're aware of this. I think I told you, Renaud, where the buying of cold medicine. If you get a common cold, you can go to the vaccine. They banned the sale of all cold medicines.
Yeah, you had to register your ID and stuff like that.
I mean, come on, guys. You know, this is all been building on this fear. And it's this fear now which suddenly has raised its ugly head, and they've actually got to turn around and say, well, A, was the fear right? Or, well, no, we found out, well, I'm sorry, but that doesn't fly.
Right. So I think yeah, go ahead.
Go on.
Oh, I was gonna say Ben has a good point. They were probably planning, okay, when we decide we're gonna reopen up, we're gonna have a lot of, a PR campaign, as you say, for a while and so on. Now, things have moved a bit faster than they wanted. And this is maybe our last question because we're getting out of time soon. But now they had to signal that they're going to open. They started the PR campaign. What are the next steps that they're likely to take until they feel that the population really is ready for it? Because I'm sure they know the population is not ready. Vaccination for old people is definitely not there. The extra beds in the camps to supplement the hospitals, probably not all ready, or not as many beds as they wanted. Maybe in the big factories, it's going to be a big mess. They need to reorganize, maybe shift A, shift B, shift C, so people don't get in contact with each other, etc., etc., etc. There's a number of measures like this. So do you think they're going to say, okay, now let's roll out some kind of plan. Let's signal that we're going to open without really opening. Let's keep the virus running. Let's hope it doesn't get too bad. So there's still some restrictions in place. Let's prepare everything. Otherwise, we have no idea how the population is going to react, right? Or do you think it's going to be very knee-jerk and like, let's open, let's see what happens, and let's close back down, let's close back, etc., etc. Do you think they're going to try to really control the process?
I think publicly they will try and control the process. I think I can imagine that there won't be much information in terms of the number of cases, the number of hospitalizations, maybe a bit of restriction there as well. And I think it'll be a combination of both. They will. I think they will put on the appearance that it is controlled. There will be local regions where that acts completely differently to others. That's my guess. And also, I think there will be, hopefully, and I think there'll be some sort of like more protection against the vulnerable now that it's out there. That like an element of shielding, or maybe certain sort of like restrictions on that. So that's my thought. Yeah.
Clive? Yeah. What do you think, Clive? Makes sense to you, or?
I agree. I agree with what Ben's saying there. There will be a veneer of success.
We have to, right? There's no other choice.
Yeah.
No other option.
Will they be the ease of getting vaccinated? Yes. I think that the best thing that they could do would be to turn the testing stations into vaccine stations. That would be a big, easy fix. You've also got a cultural aspect here where most Chinese people, after over 50 years old, believe in Chinese medicine. They don't believe in Western style medicines. That's got to be changed.
Well, they don't believe in it until they have a very scary, bad problem, right? From what I saw. Well, some people really don't believe it. Yeah.
Some people just don't believe it. Yeah, I mean, I know a neighbor of ours. He's a very nice old guy. He was a teacher in a big school here, speaks very good English, and I was asking him, and he said, no, he says, we take Chinese medicine, we don't believe Western medicines can help us. And you can't argue with that. Years and years and years of that China's medicine works, when a lot of it does, don't get me wrong. We're dealing with a completely different animal here. And that's the problem. We've had a demonization of a virus to such an extent where it is classified, as I said earlier, as cholera or bubonic plague. And you can't just switch the switch and say, oh, by the way, guys, we found out there it's not that bad. This is the same as saying we beat up the journalist here for his own good.
No comment on that. Yeah.
Don't work.
But that points to
that points to the real situation.
Yeah.
You started off by asking us what the real situation on the ground is, and that is the real situation on the ground.
Right. Yeah. People are stressed out, confused, no clear direction, and nobody knows how they can react. I think that's what we see, and very slow in providing guidelines also to factories on what exactly is happening, in what conditions will you be locked down, and so on, which is actually making the factories more careful, especially as they see that the virus is spreading more these days. So the tolerance of having visitors come in and things like that in a lot of places actually is lower than before. People are more afraid. So this is that's the situation right now. Okay, well, so to conclude, there's no crystal ball, right? We can forecast certain things that Beijing is probably working hard on preparing. They might get back to mass vaccination campaign. I think in 2021 they were vaccinating like 10 million people a day or something. It was at one point it was extremely fast, so they might get back to that, but it would still be with their domestic homegrown vaccines. And we would probably not know the real numbers anyway when we look back on that 5 years or 10 years from now, right? So it would be hard from the outside to see if it was a success or not. But I think we all agree that the transition is going to be rocky. Companies with manufacturing, with supply chains in China might well be affected if some of their key suppliers are locked down, or half of the people refuse to work at a certain point in time. That's going to be a very big problem. So yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Clive. It was a great idea to set up this discussion. Let's keep observing and let's see where it goes. Right?
I was saying we could maybe regroup after Chinese New Year. I think that'd be an interesting time once people travel back home. Right. Seeing what people are saying, and and leading after winter.
Yes, I think sounds great to me.